If you're 40, 50, or 60 right now, and you don't know exactly how your money should be split between stocks and bonds today, not 5 years ago, not 5 years from now, you're already behind, and you don't even know it. I'm Tom Wynn. 8 years ago, I was 47, sitting alone with $7,200 in savings and zero plan. I made the mistakes first, lost money I didn't have to lose. And since then, I've figured out decade by decade exactly what a portfolio needs to look like at 40, at 50, and at 60. Not theory, the actual math I use on my own accounts. Stick with me for the next hour, because by the end of this, you'll know exactly where your money stands right now and exactly what to move tonight. Here's the thing nobody tells you about turning 40 with money in the market. You still have time, real time. The kind of time that fixes almost every mistake you've made so far, if you use it right instead of wasting it being scared. I talk about this stuff every week on this channel, so if any of this hits close to home, you know what to do. I want to tell you about a guy I'll call Marcus, 41 years old, manages a warehouse outside Cincinnati. Marcus came to my comment section, which is close enough, panicking because the market had dropped 12% in 6 weeks and he'd just moved almost his entire 401k into a stable value fund. Locked in the loss, missed the recovery. By the time he moved back, he'd cost himself close to $19,000 in gains he never got back. That's not a market problem, that's an age problem. And I made a version of this exact mistake myself, so I'm not judging him. I'm telling you because I don't want you to do what he did. Here's what got Marcus. He checked his balance every single day. Every dip felt personal. And after enough red numbers in a row, his brain did what brains do. It screamed, "Get out," even though get out was the single worst financial decision available to him at that moment. 6 months later, he called it protecting his family. I understood that instinct. I felt it. But protecting your family at 41 doesn't look like moving to cash. It looks like building the emergency fund somewhere else entirely, so the market never has to answer for a bad month at work. Marcus didn't have that separation. His safety net and his growth account were the same account. That's the actual mistake, not the panic. The panic was just what exposed it. At 40, here's the rule I actually use, the one nobody hands you when you open your first 401k. Take 110, subtract your age. That's roughly the percentage that should be sitting in stocks. At 40, that's 70%, not 50%. Not play it safe because you're getting older. 70%, growing, compounding, doing the one job money is supposed to do at this stage of your life, grow. Why so aggressive? Because you have 25 years before you touch most of this. The S&P 500 has averaged close to 10% a year over the long run before inflation. Not every year. Some years it's brutal. 2022 was brutal. But over 2.5 decades, time smooths almost everything out, if you don't panic and sell at the bottom like Marcus did. Here's what I see constantly with people in their 40s. They start treating their portfolio like it's already 2045. They get one bad month and they flinch. They call it getting cautious. I call it giving away decades of growth out of fear you haven't named yet. Short version, at 40 you are not protecting money. You are still building it. But, and this matters, being 70% in stocks doesn't mean being reckless. It means being diversified within that 70%. Total market index funds, some international exposure, not your cousin's crypto tip. Not a single stock because a coworker won't stop talking about it. I learned that one the hard way, and it cost me $3,400 in 3 weeks flat. Diversified doesn't mean boring, by the way. A total U.S. market index fund alone has historically swung 15 to 20% in a single bad year. That's normal. That's not a sign something's broken. Add some international markets to that mix and the ride smooths out slightly without giving up much of the long-term growth. Marcus didn't need less risk. He needed a portfolio built so that no single bad month could ever push him into panic in the first place. Now, if you're 40, your biggest advantage isn't your allocation, it's your contribution rate, and most people your age are underfunding it because they think they'll catch up later. Later is a lie people tell themselves. I know, I told myself that exact lie for 22 years. Here's a number that should sit with you for a second. The average 401k balance for someone in their 40s is a little over $120,000. The median, the middle of the pack, the more honest number, is closer to $45,000. That gap tells you almost everyone is behind where they assumed they'd be by now. You're not the exception, you're the rule. That's not a punishment, it's information. And information is the one thing Marcus didn't have when he panicked. Nobody had ever shown him the math, so fear filled in where the math should have been. So what changes at 50? That's where it gets interesting, because at 50 the government hands you a tool most people never even hear about. I didn't until I turned 50 myself and found it by accident, and it changed everything that came after it for me. That's next. If you're 50 or older right now, there's a number sitting in the tax code that most people your age have never heard of. Not because it's hidden, because nobody bothers to tell you. I found mine by accident 3 years after I actually qualified for it. Let me back up. At 47, I had $7,200 saved and a marriage that had just ended. I did the panic things. Chased crypto, day traded for 3 weeks, lost $3,400 doing it, paid $800 for a course that told me things I could have looked up for free. $4,200 gone inside of a year. I'm not proud of that. I'm telling you because I want you to skip that part entirely. I stopped. Got quiet. Read 4 books that actually explain things instead of selling me something. Opened a Roth IRA. Started contributing to my 401k like it was a bill I owed myself. And the numbers slowly started moving the right direction. But the real shift didn't happen at 47. It happened at 50. But before I show you this number, I want you to sit with something for a second, because most 50-year-olds assume the game is basically over. It isn't. At 50, the IRS lets you contribute more than everyone younger than you, significantly more. It's called a catch-up contribution, and it exists specifically, written into the tax code specifically, for people who started late. People like you. People like me. Here's the number. For your 401k, once you turn 50, you can contribute an extra $7,500 a year on top of the regular limit. For a Roth or traditional IRA, it's an extra $1,000 a year. That's not a rounding error. Over 10 or 15 years invested in compounding, that difference is worth well into 6 figures by the time you actually retire. I want you to really hear that. Because I didn't hear it, not from my company's HR department, not from a single coworker in 22 years of working there. It was sitting in the tax code the entire time, waiting for someone to mention it to me, and nobody did. So let me ask you something, and I actually want you to answer this in the comments. Has this happened to you? Did anyone ever sit you down and explain catch-up contributions, or did you find out about this right now from a guy on YouTube? Because if the second one is true, you are not alone. Not even close. Here's the part people get wrong once they learn about catch-up contributions. They think the number is the whole strategy. It isn't. The number is just permission. What you do with it is the strategy. At 50, your allocation should be shifting but not collapsing. Using that same rule from before, 110 minus your age, you're looking at roughly 60% in stocks now, not 70%. Still growth-focused, still building, just slightly less exposed to a bad 5-year stretch than you were a decade ago. This is also the decade where people make a different mistake than Marcus made in his 40s. They don't panic sell. They just stop paying attention. They assume the account will handle itself. It won't. Not for the next 15 years, when the decisions you make now decide whether you retire comfortably or retire anxious. 5 years of maxing out catch-up contributions is what changed my entire trajectory. Not a single lucky trade, not a stock tip. 5 years of consistent, boring, unglamorous contributions at the higher limit, while my portfolio did what portfolios are supposed to do when you leave them alone. I'll be honest with you about something because I don't think enough people in this space are honest about their own mistakes. When I first started catching up at 50, I got scared of volatility again. The same fear that hit Marcus in his 40s hit me too, just dressed differently. So I moved almost a third of my new contributions into dividend-paying stocks, thinking that was the safe, mature move for someone my age. It wasn't a disaster, but it underperformed a simple total market index fund by a noticeable margin over 3 years, and it took me way too long to admit that and correct course. I share that because safe-sounding and actually safe are not the same thing, and I fell for the difference myself. And I'll say this too because it needs saying, catch-up contributions aren't a rescue plan for everyone. If maxing yours out means you can't cover rent or you're skipping your emergency fund entirely, that's not discipline. That's a different problem, and no tax code provision fixes it. This only works if the basics underneath it are already solid. At 60, though, something else changes. A window opens that most people either miss completely or walk through at exactly the wrong time, and getting it wrong can cost you tens of thousands of dollars in taxes you didn't have to pay. That's coming up. 60 is different. Not because your money runs out of time. It doesn't, not if you've been paying attention, but because 60 is when the government stops just letting you save more and starts asking you to think ahead instead of just contribute. Here's what I mean. Somewhere between 60 and 63, most people find themselves sitting on two very different pots of money. A traditional 401k or IRA, where every dollar is still owed to the IRS, you just haven't paid the bill yet. And if you've built one, a Roth account, where the taxes are already handled and every dollar is yours, free and clear, forever. Most people never think about the order they pull from those two pots. They just take whatever's easiest. That's the mistake, not a catastrophic one, a quiet one. The kind that costs you money slowly enough that you never quite notice it happening. Let me put a real number on quiet. At 73, the IRS requires you to withdraw roughly 3.77% of your traditional account balance that year, whether you need the income or not. That percentage climbs every year after. If your account has grown for a decade without any conversions, that required withdrawal can push you into a higher tax bracket than you ever expected to be in during retirement, on money you weren't even planning to spend yet. At 60, using that same allocation rule, 110 minus your age, you're sitting around 50% in stocks now. Half growth, half stability. That's not retreat. That's just balance shifting to match a timeline that's finally close enough to touch. But allocation isn't the interesting part of turning 60. The interesting part is timing. There's a window, a real specific window, between the year you stop working and the year you're forced to start taking money out of your traditional accounts, whether you want to or not. For most people right now, that forced withdrawal starts at 73. If you retire at 62, that's 11 years where you have almost complete control over how much taxable income you show the IRS each year. 11 years most people waste doing nothing with. I didn't fully understand this window myself until I started researching my own retirement timing, a few years after the catch-up contributions changed my trajectory. It's one thing to save well. It's a completely different skill to withdraw well, and almost nobody teaches that second part. I heard from a viewer a while back, retired school teacher 64, wouldn't give me her name for the video, and I respect that, who retired with a healthy traditional 401k and nothing else. No Roth, no taxable brokerage account. Just one large pot, fully taxable, sitting there for 9 years doing nothing but growing and quietly getting more expensive to touch. By the time she started taking required withdrawals, a chunk of her Social Security became taxable too, simply because her total income crossed a threshold she never knew existed. None of that was a bad decision in the moment. It was just nobody explaining the whole board to her at once. That's the thing about this window. It doesn't announce itself. There's no warning letter that arrives the day you retire saying, "Here are your 11 years, use them wisely." You either know to look for it, or you find out about it the same way she did, after the fact, on a tax return. Here's a fear I want to name directly because I think it's sitting underneath a lot of anxiety in people watching this right now. It's not just will I have enough. It's will I accidentally hand a huge chunk of what I do have to the IRS just because I didn't understand the rules. That fear is valid. And it's fixable if you know what to look for. Because there's a specific mistake almost everyone makes with that window. A timing mistake that can quietly cost tens of thousands of dollars, and most people don't find out they made it until the tax bill arrives. I'm going to walk you through exactly what that mistake looks like and exactly how to avoid it. That's next. Here's the mistake. The one that costs people real money, and almost nobody sees it coming until it's already happened. They wait too long to convert, and then they convert too much, too fast, in a single year. Let me explain what I mean by convert. A Roth conversion is when you move money out of your traditional 401k or IRA into a Roth account, paying the tax on it now at today's rate instead of later, at whatever rate the IRS decides to charge you in your 70s, done carefully over several years in that 11-year window we just talked about. It can save you an enormous amount of money over your lifetime. Done all at once, because someone finally explained the concept and you got excited and moved a huge chunk in 1 year, it can shove you into a tax bracket you never intended to touch and trigger something most people have never even heard of until it hits their mailbox. It's called IRMAA, Income-Related Monthly Adjustment Amount. If your income crosses a certain threshold, for a single filer that's a little over $103,000 in a given year, your Medicare premiums go up. Not a small amount, sometimes hundreds of dollars a month per person, and it lasts an entire year based on income from 2 years earlier. So a single big conversion at 63 can quietly increase what you pay for Medicare at 65, and most people have no idea the two are even connected until the letter arrives. And it's not just one cliff. There are multiple tiers. Cross the first threshold, your premium goes up one amount. Cross the next one, it jumps again. Married couples filing jointly have their own set of numbers, roughly double the single thresholds, but the mechanism is identical. More income now, higher Medicare bills 2 years later, automatically, with no appeal process that actually works for most people. That's the trap. Not converting. Converting recklessly. Picture two people with the exact same amount of money in the exact same traditional IRA at 62. One converts it all in a single year because a friend told her Roth accounts are better without knowing why. The other spreads the same conversion across 7 or 8 years, watching the brackets the whole time. Same total amount moved, same account. Wildly different tax bill, and a wildly different Medicare premium 2 years down the road. The money didn't change. The decision did. The fix is almost boring, which is exactly why it works. Instead of one large conversion, you convert smaller amounts every year, deliberately staying under the thresholds that matter to you, the next tax bracket, the IRMAA cliff, whatever applies to your situation. You fill up the room you have in a lower bracket on purpose year after year, instead of leaving it empty and then getting forced into a higher one later by required withdrawals you can't control. Think of those 11 years like a container you're allowed to fill at whatever pace you choose. Wait too long, and the IRS fills it for you all at once at 73 on their terms instead of yours. I want to be honest about something here too. This isn't a strategy everyone needs. If most of your retirement money is already in a Roth, or your income in retirement is going to be modest regardless, this entire conversion conversation might not move the needle much for you. I'd rather tell you that plainly than make this sound like it applies to everyone watching, because it doesn't. But if you've got a large traditional balance and years before you're forced to touch it, this is the single highest leveraged decision most people in their 60s never even know they're allowed to make. Now, I've talked about timing, I've talked about taxes, but there's one more risk sitting at exactly this stage of the journey that can do more damage in a single bad year than almost anything else we've covered, and it has nothing to do with taxes at all. It has to do with exactly when a bad market year happens to you. But before I show you this, I want you to actually picture your own retirement date for a second. Not a vague someday, an actual year. Because what I'm about to walk you through is about that specific year and the 5 after it, more than almost anything else in this video. That's next. And it's the part of this video I almost didn't want to make, because it's the one that scared me the most when I first understood it. I need you to understand something that almost nobody explains clearly, and once you see it, you won't be able to unsee it. 2 people can retire with the exact same amount of money, take out the exact same percentage every year, get the exact same average return over 25 years, and one of them runs out of money a full decade before the other one. Same math, same average. Wildly different outcome. It's called sequence of returns risk, and it has nothing to do with how good your investments are. It has everything to do with when the bad years happen to hit you. Here's the example that made it click for me. Imagine 2 retirees, both starting with exactly $1,000, both withdrawing 4% a year, both getting the same average return of roughly 7% over 25 years. Retiree 1 gets hit with a rough market in year 1, a 15% drop, right after they've just started pulling money out. Retiree 2 gets that exact same 15% drop, same size, same shape, but it happens in year 24 instead of year 1, near the very end of the same 25-year stretch. Retiree 1 statistically can run out of money years before retiree 2, sometimes a full decade earlier, even though their average annual return over the whole period is identical. The only difference is timing. A bad year early while you're withdrawing does damage that a bad year late simply can't do, because there's less money left to shrink and more time for the withdrawals to compound the damage. Say that out loud to yourself for a second. The exact same average return produced 2 completely different retirements. This isn't hypothetical either. People who retired right around 2008 lived this. The market dropped roughly 37% that year. Anyone pulling a steady 4% out of a portfolio while it fell that hard got hit twice. Once by the market, once by their own withdrawals shrinking an already shrinking account. People who retired a few years later into the recovery instead of the crash never felt anything close to that same damage, even though both groups experienced the same decade of market history eventually. This is why the 5 years before you retire and the 5 years right after matter more than almost any other stretch of your entire financial life. Not because the market is more dangerous during those years. It isn't. It's because that's the window where a bad year does the most permanent damage, and it's the window most people pay the least attention to, because they're either still working, distracted, or newly retired and just trying to enjoy it. I think about Marcus here too, actually. His mistake was panicking in his 40s and locking in a loss he didn't have to take. This risk is different, but it rhymes. In both cases, the damage isn't really about the market. It's about being forced to make a decision, sell or withdraw, at exactly the moment you have the least room to absorb it. I'll be honest, this is the one that scared me. Not the catch-up contributions, not the Roth timing. This, because it means the market doesn't have to be bad overall for you to get hurt. It just has to be bad at exactly the wrong moment, and you don't get to pick when that moment is. Nobody gets to pick when that moment is. Not you, not me, not the smartest advisor in the country. So what do you actually do about a risk you can't predict or control the timing of? You don't try to time it. You build a buffer that makes the timing irrelevant. Here's the short version of what that buffer looks like before I walk through it properly. A portion of your money, usually a few years' worth of planned withdrawals, sitting somewhere that isn't exposed to a crash at all. Cash, short-term bonds, something boring on purpose. Not because it grows well, because when the market drops 30% the year after you retire, you don't have to touch your stocks to pay your bills. You wait it out with the buffer instead and let the rest of the portfolio recover on its own schedule instead of yours. That's what the last stretch of this video is about. Not another rule, not another number. The actual buffer, what it looks like, how big it needs to be, and how it turns a decade of bad luck into a non-event. That's coming up, and it's where all of this, the 40s, the 50s, the 60s, finally comes together into one picture. Okay, here's the buffer, properly, the way I actually think about it now. Because everything I've told you so far, the allocation shifts, the catch-up contributions, the conversion timing, none of it means much if one bad year at exactly the wrong moment can undo it. This is the piece that protects the rest. Most people call this a bucket strategy, and I used to think that name was just marketing language for something simple. It isn't. It's the single piece that ties everything we've talked about, the 40s, the 50s, the 60s, into one system instead of three separate decades of advice. Bucket 1, 2 to 3 years of planned living expenses, sitting in cash or something close to it, a high-yield savings account, short-term treasuries, nothing exciting. This is the money that pays your bills no matter what the market is doing the year you retire. If the market drops 30% the month after your last paycheck, this bucket means you never have to sell a single share into that drop. You just live off bucket 1 while everything else recovers. Bucket 2, 5 to 7 more years of expenses in a moderate mix, some bonds, some stable dividend-paying stocks. This is what refills bucket 1 gradually during normal or good years, so you're never forced to sell your growth investments at a bad price just to eat. Bucket 3, everything else, still growing. Still mostly stocks, even in your late 60s and 70s, because this money isn't for next year. It's for 15, 20 years from now, and it needs the growth to last that long. Let me put real numbers on it just so this isn't abstract. Say you need $50,000 a year to live comfortably in retirement. Bucket 1 holds somewhere around $100,000 to $150,000, 2 to 3 years in cash. Bucket 2 holds roughly $250,000 to $350,000, 5 to 7 years in that moderate mix. Everything above that in Bucket 3 keeps working for the long stretch. The exact numbers move depending on your own expenses and your other income, like Social Security, but the shape of it stays the same for almost everyone. Here's what makes this different from just having some cash on hand. It's the refilling discipline. In good years, and most years are good years, that's easy to forget after a bad one, you top Bucket 1 back up from Bucket 2 and Bucket 2 back up from Bucket 3. You're not reacting to the market. You built the system once and then you just feed it. Go back to Marcus for a second. If Marcus had understood this, even in his 40s, even before retirement, the entire panic never happens. He wasn't actually short on money. He was short on a plan for what to do when the number on the screen scared him. A bucket system, even a small one, would have given his fear somewhere to land besides sell everything right now. This is what I mean when I say the decade you're in changes the question, but not the underlying goal. At 40, the question is, how much growth can I afford to take on? At 50, it's, how do I use every advantage the tax code is actually giving me? At 60, it's, how do I turn savings into an income I can't outlive without handing extra money to the IRS along the way? 3 different questions, one answer underneath all of them. Build the system before you need it, not while you're panicking in the middle of it. I didn't have this figured out at 47. I barely had it figured out at 50. I have it now at 55, 8 years into this, and I'm still not there yet. I want to be honest about that because I think too many people in this space pretend they've arrived. I haven't. But for the first time in my adult life, I know exactly what the plan is, decade by decade, and I sleep through the night because of it. That's really what this whole video has been about. Not a trick, not a shortcut. A plan that finally matches your actual timeline instead of some generic advice built for someone 20 years younger than you. Whatever decade you're in right now, 40, 50, 60, somewhere in between, the system doesn't change shape, only the numbers do. And once you see that, the whole thing stops feeling like 3 separate problems and starts feeling like one plan you're just executing at different stages. And there's one more piece, the part that brings this all the way home. So here's what to actually do tonight. Not tomorrow, not when things settle down, because there's always going to be a headline telling you things haven't settled down. Tonight, after this video ends, before you close the app and move on with the rest of your evening, if you're 40, log into your 401k and look at one number, your current stock-to-bond split. If it's not somewhere close to 70-30, you have 25 years to fix that, and every month you wait is a month of growth you don't get back. It takes about 4 clicks. Most plans let you rebalance right there tonight without calling anyone or filling out a single form. You don't need a financial advisor for this step. You need 4 clicks and the willingness to actually make them. If you're 50, look for one line item, your contribution limit, not the number you're currently putting in. The actual limit, the one that includes your catch-up amount. If there's a gap between what you're contributing and what you're allowed to contribute, that gap is the exact size of the discovery that changed my life 8 years ago. Sitting right there in your own account, waiting for you to notice it the way I finally did. Even bumping your contribution by 2 or 3% tonight, right now, starts compounding immediately. You don't have to max it out this year. You have to stop leaving it at 0. If you're 60 or close to it, open a spreadsheet, a real one, not a mental one, and write down what 1 year of your expenses actually costs. That number is the first brick of bucket 1, not the whole bucket, just the first brick. You don't build the buffer in one night, you start it in one night. Rent, groceries, insurance, the basics, add them up, and you'll have a real number instead of the vague, anxious guess most people carry around in their head for years without ever writing it down. 3 different moves, 3 different decades. None of them require a phone call, a meeting, or a single dollar spent on anyone's advice. Just you, your own account, and 10 honest minutes tonight instead of another year of, "I'll deal with that later." The same sentence that cost me 22 years. Back when I was the one saying it, every single time the money conversation came up and I found something easier to think about instead. That's the promise I made you at the start of this video. Not you'll feel motivated, not you'll understand the concepts, that by the end of this, you'd know exactly where your money stands and exactly what to move tonight. You just heard it in plain terms with real numbers attached. 3 different moves for 3 different decades, and every single one of them takes less than 10 minutes. I got an update on Marcus, by the way, the guy from earlier, the warehouse manager, the one who moved everything to cash during that 6-week drop and gave up $19,000. He didn't have to give up. He didn't fix everything overnight. Nobody does. It took him a few months and a couple of uncomfortable conversations about his own account before he built anything at all. But he built a small buffer, bucket one, nothing fancy, just enough that the next dip didn't send him into that same panic. Last I heard, he hadn't touched his stock allocation once during the following downturn, not because he stopped being scared, because the fear finally had somewhere else to go besides the sell button. That's it. That's the whole difference between where he was and where he is now. Not more knowledge. Somewhere for the fear to land. 3 mistakes, $4,200 gone in a single year before I turned 48. A discovery at 50 that nobody bothered to tell me about. Sitting in the tax code the entire time. Unread, unmentioned, waiting. 8 years and a portfolio that finally grows on purpose instead of by accident. That's the recap. That's the whole arc. I started this channel because in 2019, at 11 p.m., alone in an apartment staring at $7,200 and a life that didn't look anything like I'd planned, I searched for someone who'd actually been where I was. I found 23-year-olds with rented Ferraris. I never found the guy who was still in the middle of it, still making mistakes, still figuring it out in real time. So I became him. 8 years in. Still not there. Still learning things the hard way sometimes. But I know exactly what the plan looks like now, for whatever decade you're standing in. And that's not nothing. That's everything, actually, compared to where I started. I think about that 11 p.m. search a lot, honestly. Somewhere out there tonight, someone your age is doing the exact same thing I did. Sitting with a number on a screen that doesn't match the life they thought they'd have by now. Searching for someone who's actually lived it instead of just sold it. If that's you tonight, I want you to know the searching part is over. You don't need the next video or the next guru or the next course. You needed the math laid out plainly, decade by decade, by somebody who made every mistake in it first. You have that now. Here's the part I want to leave you with because I think it matters more than any single rule in this video. Every number I gave you tonight, the 70-30 split, the $7,500 catch-up, the 3.77% required withdrawal, the IRMA thresholds, the 2 buckets and their dollar ranges, every one of those numbers changes slightly over time. Limits go up, thresholds shift. The exact figures in this video will be a little different in 5 years, and that's fine, that's expected. That's how tax law and inflation always work. What doesn't change is the shape underneath the numbers. Grow aggressively while you have time. Use every legal advantage the moment you qualify for it. Control your taxable income in the years you're allowed to control it. Protect the withdrawals that happen at exactly the wrong moment. That shape held true for me at 47 with $7,200, and it'll hold true for you whether you're standing at 40, 50, or 60 tonight, watching this, wondering if it's too late. It isn't. I'm 8 years into proving that particular sentence true, one boring, unglamorous year at a time. No lucky trade, no shortcut, no rented Ferrari, just the plan, followed on purpose, decade after decade. I share something like this every single week. The real version, mistakes included, not the polished version most of this space sells you. If tonight's the night you finally want that kind of thing in your corner instead of finding it by accident at 11 p.m. the way I did, hit subscribe. That's really all it is. No course attached to it, no upsell waiting on the other side. Just the next video whenever your decade needs it. And if the part of this video that actually sat with you was that sequence of returns risk, the idea that the exact same average return can produce 2 completely different retirements depending on when the bad year hits. I made an entire video walking through exactly how to size your own buffer for that risk, decade by decade, with the real numbers for your own situation, including how much to hold in each bucket based on your actual expenses instead of a generic rule of thumb. That's the natural next step from here, and it's sitting right on this channel waiting for you whenever you're ready for it. You didn't need a guru tonight. You needed the math, laid out plainly, decade by decade, by someone who'd actually lived it, mistakes, panic, the whole 8 years of it, not the polished highlight reel. Now you have it. Go look at that one number.